This is not a place for teaching poor kids, a customer shouted in her face. The elderly teacher simply bowed her head and continued helping the child with the torn sleeve. 3 months later, Burger Spot closed for a day to hold a ceremony honoring her, what caused a group of disadvantaged children to transform an entire town into a miracle story. Welcome to QH, let's uncover what really happened. Elaine Monroe's hands trembled slightly as she arranged her worn textbooks on the Burger Spot table. At 68, the retired elementary school teacher's movements weren't as fluid as they once were, but her determination remained undiminished. The afternoon sun filtered through the large windows, casting a warm glow on her silver hair as she sipped her small coffee, the only purchase she could afford on her meager pension. For 43 years, Elaine had taught at Brookstone Elementary in this small Texas town. Now living alone in a tiny apartment 3 blocks from this Burger Spot, she maintained her daily ritual, bringing books to the restaurant each afternoon, enjoying the air conditioning and the occasional conversation with other regulars. The post-pandemic world had been particularly harsh on Brookstone, where nearly 30% of families lived below the poverty line. School disruptions had left many children struggling academically, especially those without internet access or parental supervision. Elaine noticed them gathered at Burger Spot, not for the food few could afford more than the occasional ice cream, but for the free Wi-Fi. "Miss, could you help me with this?" The first request came from Marcus, a skinny 10-year-old with bright eyes and a math worksheet full of eraser marks. Elaine hesitated only briefly before sliding over. "Of course, dear, let's see what we're working with." That simple exchange changed everything. The next day, Marcus returned with his cousin. Within a week, a small group formed around Elaine's regular table. By month's end, 10 to 12 children would wait for her arrival, homework in hand, hope in their eyes. Not everyone appreciated the impromptu classroom. Regular customers began to complain, first in whispers, then openly. "I come here for peace and quiet, not to hear a bunch of kids," muttered Mrs. Gaines, a long-time resident who always ordered the same chicken sandwich. "This place is turning into a daycare," another man grumbled loudly. "What's next?" Story time at the drive-thru. When Tariq, a quiet boy from the trailer park, knocked over his water cup during an excited moment solving an equation, the situation escalated. "That's it," a well-dressed businessman slammed his palm on his table. "This is not a place for teaching poor kids. Some of us are trying to eat in peace." Elaine flinched at his words, but didn't respond. She simply dabbed at the spill with napkins and continued helping Tariq understand fractions. But the outburst caught the attention of Tom Walters, the restaurant manager, who approached with a concerned expression. "Mrs. Monroe," he said quietly, "we've had several complaints. I'm afraid I need to ask you to restrict these activities. We're running a business here." Elaine looked at the children's faces, some frightened, others defiant, all needing something she could provide. "Miss Walters," she replied softly, "these children have nowhere else to go. Could we perhaps use just that corner table? We'll be very quiet." The manager hesitated, glancing between Elaine and the disapproving customers. "1 week," he finally said, "then we'll revisit this." Elaine nodded, gathering her materials. "Thank you, we'll be respectful of your space." That evening alone in her apartment, Elaine stared at her teaching certificate framed on the wall. Adjacent to it hung a plaque, Teacher of the Year. She wondered if after all these years, her most important teaching might be happening now in the corner of a fast food restaurant with children society had largely forgotten. "The kind ones often pay the highest price," she whispered to her empty room. "But sometimes it's the only road they know to travel." Stay with us to discover what happens next to Mrs. Monroe. By the third month of her Burger Spot tutoring sessions, Elaine noticed something extraordinary happening among her impromptu students. Tariq, a 12-year-old who had barely spoken when he first arrived, solved a complex algebra problem that Elaine herself needed to think twice about. "Where did you learn to think like that?" she asked, genuinely impressed. Tariq shrugged. "You showed me last week how to break down big problems. I just kept practicing at home." A week later, Tariq's math teacher sent a note with him. "Whatever you're doing with Tariq, please continue. He's qualified for the state mathematics competition, a first for our school in 7 years." Then there was Lecia, a shy 10-year-old from a Mexican immigrant family who struggled with English reading comprehension. Elaine spent extra time with her using picture books and patience. After 6 weeks, Daniela handed Elaine a wrinkled paper. She had won the town's essay contest with a piece about her grandmother's journey to America. "You did this," Elaine told the beaming girl. "I just helped you find your voice." As word spread about the children's accomplishments, more students joined the afternoon session. Elaine never turned anyone away, though her table became increasingly crowded. She simply smiled and made room for one more. "They're all gems," she told Tom the manager when he expressed surprise at her dedication. "Some just need the dust brushed off to shine." Not everyone appreciated the growing success. A group of parents from the more affluent part of town sent a formal complaint to the Burger Spot corporate office. The establishment has become a gathering place for unsupervised children from the less desirable neighborhood. The atmosphere has declined considerably, making the restaurant unsuitable for professional clientele. The letter, printed on expensive stationery, was signed by 12 families. Online, the situation grew worse. Someone filmed Elaine tutoring the children and posted it with a mocking caption: "Retired teacher, works for free because she has nothing else to lose." Comments ranged from pitying to cruel, with some suggesting she was mentally unstable or seeking attention. The video caught the attention of local business. When Elaine went to buy additional notebooks and pencils for the children at Parker Stationery, the owner frowned. "Sorry, Mrs. Monroe, we're out of those supplies." His eyes didn't meet hers as he spoke, though Elaine could clearly see stacks of notebooks behind the counter. Former colleagues began to distance themselves. Sharon Pierce, who had taught alongside Elaine for 15 years, crossed the street to avoid greeting her. At church, people who once saved her a seat now filled the pews with purses and jackets when they saw her approach. "They're afraid," Carlos Rivera explained Angela, the church secretary who still smiled at Elaine. "Afraid your kindness makes their inaction look bad." One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Elaine noticed a stranger in the Burger Spot, a man in his 40s wearing a baseball cap pulled low, sitting alone near her table. He remained for 3 hours, occasionally typing on his phone, but mostly observing the tutoring session. Before leaving, he approached and placed a folded note beside Elaine's coffee. "We owe you a great debt," it read. "Someone will be back." Elaine tucked the mysterious note into her Bible and thought little more of it. Distracted by more immediate concern, Tom the manager had been summoned to a regional meeting, returning with a somber expression. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, voice strained, "I've received official warning from corporate. If these gatherings continue, I'll need to ask you to leave permanently." Elaine nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling heavily on her shoulders. "I understand, Tom, you have a business to run." That evening she carefully packed extra worksheets for each child, writing their names in her neat teacher script. "If I'm not here tomorrow," she told them as they left, "make sure you read Chapter 3 on your own. Don't fall behind." Tariq lingered after the others had gone. "They can't make you stop teaching us," he said fiercely. "It's not fair." Elaine gently patted his hand. "Life rarely is, dear, but what matters is how we respond to unfairness." The following day, Elaine arrived to find a new sign posted at her usual table. "Study area closed." Tom couldn't meet her eyes as he gestured to the corporate note. Elaine gathered her dignity along with her worn book bag and walked out, feeling the stares of customers following her. Outside, a small cluster of her students waited, uncertainty on their faces. "What now, Mrs. Monroe?" asked Daniela, clutching her English homework. Elaine had no answer. For the first time in her teaching career, she had run out of options. Throughout town, gossip spread quickly. "Finally got rid of that homeless classroom," remarked a salon owner as she styled a client's hair. "Burger Spot isn't a charity after all." "Those poor kids," countered another woman. "Who will help them now? Maybe their own parents," came the sharp reply. "That's how it's supposed to work. If you still believe that small actions can change an entire future, type HOP. Elaine tried tutoring at the public library, but the restricted hours and strict silence policy made meaningful teaching difficult. She attempted to use the park, but April's showers and mosquitoes quickly ended that experiment. Her small apartment couldn't accommodate more than 2 children at once. Some of the students stopped coming altogether, others would find Elaine wherever she was, at the grocery store, the laundromat, the bus stop. Homework clutched hopefully in their hands. "I'm sorry," she would tell, "I'm still looking for a place." Inside, Elaine felt the weight of failure pressing down. For the first time since her husband's death 12 years earlier, she questioned whether she had anything left to offer the world. Her arthritis flared painfully, and she found herself sleeping later each morning, lacking the purpose that had driven her for decades. On a particularly gloomy Thursday, Elaine was surprised by a knock at her apartment door. Tom from Burger Spot stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Monroe," I need you to come to the restaurant tomorrow at 10 a.m., he said. Tom, if this is about collecting my reading glasses, I can, please, and he interrupted, just be there at 10. It's important. The following morning, Elaine dressed carefully in her best outfit, a navy blue dress she saved for church and special occasions. Perhaps she thought the corporate office had reconsidered, perhaps she could resume her small teaching effort under certain conditions. As she approached Burger Spot, something seemed different. The parking lot was full, but the familiar golden arches display showed an unusual message, closed for private event. Elaine hesitated at the entrance, wondering if she had misunderstood Tom's request when the door swung open. Tom himself ushered her in, an unfamiliar excitement in his eyes. Inside, Elaine froze. The restaurant had been transformed, the usual tables were rearranged, a small podium stood at the center, and every seat was filled, not with regular customers, but with her students and their family. Before she could process this sight, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Through the windows, Elaine saw 3 black SUVs, with tinted windows pull into the parking lot, followed by news vans. A small helicopter descended on the adjacent park, its rotors sending dust swirling across the landscape. What in heaven's name, Elaine whispered. The restaurant door opened again, and a tall man in an immaculate suit entered, flanked by assistants. Elaine recognized him instantly from news programs and magazine covers. Nathan Royce, the 38-year-old CEO of Horizon Technologies, one of the largest tech companies in the world. The room fell silent as Royce surveyed the space, his eyes finally landing on Elaine. To everyone's astonishment, this titan of industry, worth billions and known for his confident demeanor, suddenly appeared vulnerable, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. Mrs. Monroe, he said, his voice carrying clearly despite its softness. You don't remember me, do you? Elaine studied his face, confusion evident in her expression. 25 years ago, Royce continued, you volunteered at the Brookstone Community Center after school. There was a boy there homeless, living in a shelter with his mother after they fled an abusive home. This boy couldn't read, was failing every subject, and had been written off by most teachers. Recognition dawned slowly on Elaine's face. Nate, she whispered, little Nate with the broken glasses. Nathan Royce nodded, a tear finally escaping down his cheek. You stayed with me every day for 2 hours after your regular teaching job. You brought me books, you taught me to solve equations on napkins, because we couldn't afford paper. He approached her, reaching for her hand. The algorithm that launched my first company, that eventually became Horizon Technologies, was based on a pattern recognition exercise you taught me using dominoes. The room remained absolutely silent, everyone transfixed by the unfolding scene. Last month, Nathan continued, my mother showed me a viral video of an elderly teacher being mocked for tutoring poor kids at Burger Spot. I flew from San Francisco that night, sat in this restaurant for 3 hours, and confirmed what I already knew in my heart, that it was you, still changing lives. He turned to address the gathered crowd. Everything I am, everything I've built, began with this woman who never gave up on a child everyone else had discarded. Royce's assistant brought forward a leather portfolio. Mrs. Monroe, I've established the Elaine Monroe Educational Foundation, with an initial endowment of It will provide full scholarships for every child you've tutored, not just through college, but all the way through graduate school if they choose that path. Gasps and murmurs filled the restaurant. Parents clutched their children, some openly weeping. Additionally, Royce continued, we're building a state-of-the-art learning center in Brookstone, with your name on the door, and a permanent position for you at whatever capacity you wish to serve. Elaine swayed slightly, overwhelmed by his words. Tariq rushed forward to steady her, his young face beaming with pride. One more thing, Nathan said, gesturing toward Tom. Burger Spot Corporation has agreed to designate this day, April 23rd, as Elaine Monroe Day in all their Texas locations. This specific restaurant will feature a permanent study area for children with free Wi-Fi supplies and snacks for students. The room erupted in applause. Through the windows, Elaine could see neighbors and townspeople gathering outside, drawn by the commotion and news. Among the faces, she recognized the businessmen who had shouted at her, the parents who had signed the complaint letter, and the stationery store owner who had refused to sell her supplies. They stood awkwardly at the periphery, witnesses to a reckoning they never anticipated. When the excitement finally settled, reporters clamored for interviews. Elaine declined them all with gentle firmness. Instead, she gathered her students in a circle,
and spoke only to them. I never needed the world to notice me, she said softly. I only needed you to notice yourself. Growing up and passing this kindness forward, that will be my true legacy. Nathan Royce nodded in understanding. This woman hadn't changed in 25 years. Her reward had never been recognition, but rather the success of her students. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Elaine found herself alone with Nathan for a moment. You could have any job in the world now, he told her. Name it, and it's yours. Elaine smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. I already have the only job I've ever wanted, she replied, teaching children that they matter. 1 year after the dramatic events at Burger Spot, the Elaine Monroe Learning Center opened its doors in what had once been an abandoned department store in downtown Brookstone. The modern facility gleamed with new computers, a library stocked with thousands of books, and classrooms designed for both traditional and innovative teaching methods. Elaine herself maintained her simple lifestyle. She still lived in the same small apartment, though Nathan had secretly arranged for the building's renovation and paid her rent for life. She still carried the same worn book bag, now mended professionally, but bearing all its original patches and pins from decades of use. And she still greeted each child with the same warm smile that had been her hallmark for nearly half a century. The Learning Center became more than an educational facility. It transformed into the heart of the community. Parents who had never completed high school enrolled in GED classes. Senior citizens offered workshops on practical skills, from cooking to basic home repairs. The computer lab remained open until midnight, giving everyone in Brookstone access to technology many had never before touched. Inside the building's main entrance hung a framed yellowed handkerchief, under glass. The same one Elaine had used for years to wipe chalkboards and dry occasional tears. Embroidered on its corner in delicate stitching were the words, "To teach is to touch a life forever." The Burger Spot where everything began maintained its promise. The Elaine Monroe Corner became a permanent fixture with 4 tables always reserved for students. The manager, Tom, proudly oversaw a program that provided free meals to children studying there. Even Miss Gaines, who had once complained about the noise, now volunteered twice weekly to help younger children with reading. Mrs. Monroe didn't just teach us subjects, explained Daniela during a community celebration. 15 years old now, and already receiving college recruitment letters, she stood confidently at the podium, where once she had been too shy to speak above a whisper. She taught us to believe we deserved an education. She taught us that where we came from didn't determine where we could go. Tariq, now preparing for a mathematics competition at the state university, nodded in agreement. Before Mrs. Monroe, I thought smart was something you either were or weren't. She showed me that smart is something you become, one problem at a time. Throughout Brookstone, the ripple effects continued to spread. Test scores across the district rose by 27%. The high school graduation rate, once among the lowest in Texas, now exceeded the state average. Families who could have moved to wealthier areas chose to stay, invested in the community's transformation. Elaine herself spoke little about these accomplishments. When praised, she deflected attention to the children and their families. All I did was show up, she would say. They did the hard work, but Nathan Royce, who visited quarterly and maintained close contact with his former teacher, knew better. No one remembers the times she turned down television interviews, he told a gathering of business leaders, considering similar educational initiatives. No one remembers the tears she shed privately when things seemed hopeless. But everyone will remember that because of her, a generation learned that knowledge is the most beautiful. Thank you. On her 72nd birthday, surrounded by current and former students spanning decades, Elaine was asked if she had any regrets about spending her retirement years teaching, rather than relaxing. She considered the question carefully before answering. Time passes whether we use it or waste it, she said finally. I can think of no better use for mine than being where I was needed most. Elaine never wanted fanfare, only for one child to know they were seen. In that Burger Spot booth, she stitched dignity into lives with scraps of wisdom, her voice quiet but steady. And in a world that often forgets its elders, she became a reminder that the truest kind of power is patient, personal, and persistent. The kind that asks nothing in return, except that the lesson be passed on. As I've written Mrs. Monroe's story over these past days, I keep asking myself, how many Elaine Monroes are out there right now, quietly planting seeds that the world barely notices? In every town, in every city, there are people who refuse to look away when they see a need. They don't wait for perfect conditions or official permission. They simply step forward and say, I can help with that. And day after day, they show up offering what they have, whether it's knowledge, time, or simply unwavering belief in someone else's potential. We live in a world that celebrates the loud, the dramatic, the instantly viral. Social media rewards grand gestures, captured in perfect lighting. But Mrs. Monroe reminds us that the most profound changes often happen in the shadows, in burger spot corners, in apartment hallways, in quiet conversations that never make headlines. I wonder about the moments we've missed. The teachers who stayed late without recognition. The neighbors who checked on elderly residents without posting about it. The strangers who paid for someone's groceries when no cameras were rolling. I wonder about all the kindnesses that changed lives, but never changed algorithms or trended on social platforms. If you've ever had someone like Elaine Monroe in your life, a teacher, a mentor, a parent, or even a stranger who believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself, think of them today. Their fingerprints are on your accomplishment. Their voice sometimes still whispers in your ear when challenges arise. Perhaps you didn't get to thank them properly. Perhaps, like Nathan Royce, you lost track of them until it was almost too late. Or perhaps you're the Elaine Monroe in someone else's story, showing up consistently, offering what you can, never quite knowing the impact you're making. The greatest heroes rarely wear capes or receive medals. They carry worn book bags and sit in fast food restaurants after their shifts end. They remember your name when everyone else has forgotten it. They see potential where others see problems. We don't need grand platforms or massive resources to change lives. We need persistence. We need presence. We need the courage to sit beside someone struggling and say, let me help you figure this out. There are people who spend their entire lives illuminating the path for others, without demanding that anyone hold a light for them in return. If you believe these quiet heroes deserve to be remembered, subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where everyday heroes are never forgotten. Type remember if you carry in your heart a teacher like Mrs. Monroe, someone who changed your life, in ways they may never fully understand. We told their story, you gave it meaning. Thank you.